Hey everybody, Mr. Grooch here. Today is April 7th. Actually, it's during spring break, so I hope you're having a good spring break. We're doing our second video today. I'm going to try to keep it under 5 minutes, so that means that you're only going to have about 10-15 minutes of homework for me today. So, today, the video is about the parts of the Constitution. Our Constitution isn't very long, but it's very complicated for most people, okay? We're just going to walk through the different parts today, and so that you have a better understanding of how our government works through this document. Now, this document is confusing to people because they think it's all the laws and all the stuff that we do in our government, but it's really not. What it is kind of the outline for our government, right? And so I'm going to share my screen here. We're going to go to our notes today. Before we get started on the outline and what's in the document itself, I've pulled out a few notes, a little bit of a timeline on the Constitution right here. It was written in 1787 during the Constitutional Convention. Remember, we talked about the Articles of Confederation, and they were garbage, and so we had to rewrite our Constitution, and that's what we did. We got together in Philadelphia, and then we realized we can't just change the articles. We have to write a new constitution, and that's why it's renamed the Constitutional Convention. So they write this in 1787 in pretty secretive way, and then they send it out to the states, and then they have to ratify it. Ratify it has to do with approving it, okay? And that's one of the parts of the constitutions we'll get to. So it takes almost a full year later, 1788, the 9th state ratifies it, and that means it goes into effect. Okay, the first Congress, March 1789. Okay, so we got our independence in 1776, 1789. So we're 13 years later, right? 13 years later, we have our Constitution. George Washington, our first president, the only one unanimously elected, 1789, April of 1789, he becomes president of the United States. Before that, we didn't really have a president. Okay, we had a president of the Congress, but not the president of the United States. So the executive branch starts in 1789. Part of this ratification was the Bill of Rights. We'll get to that in a little bit later, but the draft was proposed in 1789. The first draft by James Madison there were like 19 amendments. Finally, the one that got to the states was like 12. The ones that we agreed on, there were 10. So the first 10 amendments or changes, amendments means changes in this context. So the first 10 things that we added or we changed to our Constitution went into effect in 1791. Okay? So let's talk about the parts of the Constitution. The preamble. The preamble. Before we amble, we have to preamble. And so this is where we, the people, that comes from, right? Those are the first 3 words of the Constitution. It means that we're setting up a democracy, right? It's a very special type of democracy, a republic. A lot of people get into a debate, what's the difference between a democracy and a republic? Well, a republic is a form of democracy, but we're not a direct democracy. A republic sets up a representative democracy. Meaning it's the democracy, demo, which is the Greek for people. We, the people, set up our government. We control our government. But in doing so, we elect officials or representatives to do that for us. We're not a direct democracy. A direct democracy would mean that the citizens vote on everything. So every law that we want to do, everything that we want to do, the citizens vote on it. This is just not efficient, and it's probably not the best way to run a country, because if people aren't well educated on the law, they probably shouldn't be voting on it. So what do? We elect people to represent us, and they vote for us. So we vote for the voters, okay? So the preamble talks about that. That's what we're doing. We're setting up a government that is a democracy and is run by the people, okay? Article 1 is the legislative powers, okay? Legislative powers, legislative branch we're going to go into in depth, but this is the people that this literally means to. The LEG means law, and slate means right. The people that write laws. Okay, classical roots again. Article 2, executive powers. The executive branch is the president and all of the departments that he or she runs. So the Department of Education, Department of Defense, Treasury Secretary, all of those things are under the executive branch. We'll go into the executive branch in a couple of days. Third article, judicial branch, judicial powers. Okay, a lot of people think the judicial branch is just the Supreme Court. It's not. It's the entire federal system of courts. Okay, and we have some good activities that we're going to do about that later. Okay, so the three branches of government, set it up. Articles 1, 2, and 3. Article 4 talks about, if you're following along, we're on page 3 in today's iCivics, page 3, Article 4. Article 4 is the relationship between the states and federal government. Remember, federal means national, or like Washington, D.C., states, Minnesota, St. Paul, federal, national, Washington, D.C. So the relationship between that. Remember, that was a really big deal at this time because we went from the Articles of Confederation where everybody thought that they were kind of in charge of themselves, and then we worked together for big things. This changes that. Article 5 is amending the Constitution. This is a often overlooked part of our document, but it's probably one of the most important parts. A lot of countries have had several constitutions. We've had two, I guess, if you call it the Articles of Confederation, but we've had one for the longest period of time of any other country. Okay, and that's because we can change it if we need to. Amending means change. We've had 27 amendments since the start, but remember, 10 of them happened right away. 12 of them were proposed, only 10 adopted. Sixth, the supreme law of the land. This means that the Constitution trumps everything. It's the biggest law of the land. And in fact, everybody that works for the federal government in the judicial, executive, or legislative branch have to take an oath to the Constitution. It's their job to preserve it. And if they don't, then they can be removed from office. And so that's why this article is so important. It talks about how what we do with the Constitution is very, very important. Finally, the 7th article is ratification. Ratification means approval or voting for it. And so in this article, they talk about how at the time we had 13 states, 9 of them had to approve it before it became law. Okay. Finally, the last part is the Bill of Rights. 10, these are kind of the natural rights of humans living in the United States. The first 10 were proposed. Remember, a lot of people said we're not going to sign this document until we get the Bill of Rights. And so that's kind of the agreement. Okay, let's push through this ratification. We agree that we will add the Bill of Rights. And the Bill of Rights were determined that the 10 that we have were the ones that we were going to start with. Okay. After that, we've had the 11 through 27. These are other rights. Some of them are what we would call government protocol, or how the government functions, and others are rights of individuals. For example, the Civil Rights Amendments 13, 14, 15 talk about it's after the Civil War and we end slavery, and then we give everyone the right, every male the right to vote. The 19th Amendment is the right for women to vote. Okay, all of these we'll go into in depth, the Bill of Rights, and then we'll talk about the rights of individuals on top of that as well. Okay, that's all I have today. It took me 9 minutes. I'm sorry. I'm going to get faster at this, I promise. But I hope you're all doing well. I am going to close my meeting right now. Have a good day.